It's no doubt that the Naruto franchise has proven itself to be legendary within not only the anime space, but the video game industry as well. And although amassing a large list of hits, there were some games that still didn't quite hit the ball. And one of those was Naruto Uzumaki Chronicles. Over the past few years, I've seen a lot of hate in regard to this game, with most critics and gamers calling it the worst Naruto title of all time. I was a bit skeptical of this at first, because there's a fair amount of players who do seem to enjoy this game, and I did own it myself as a kid. Now, to be fair, it wasn't for very long, because I can distinctly remember putting this game down fairly quickly, but I couldn't remember why, and I always assumed it was mostly due to the difficulty and my inexperience with gaming at that age. But regardless of the reasoning and how long it's been, I could not leave a game unfinished. And having a recently renewed interest in the series, I found there to be no better opportunity as a casual fan to give my unbiased review on the PlayStation 2 classic 19 years later. And in this video, we'll discuss why this entry developed a negative reputation, if there's any redeeming qualities to it, and the ins and outs of the game overall. Now, I want to begin by stating, when I first started my playthrough, I was not feeling this game at all. Mostly due to how much different this was than I anticipated, gameplay-wise, and even the plot itself, which strays far from the original story. In fact, Naruto Uzumaki Chronicles doesn't cover any arc, because aside from minor references to the canon plotlines, its story is mostly a what-if scenario, which, in concept, could be thought of as a great thing. I mean, how many games retreading the same old material do we really need? But as you'll see, the problems with this arise very early on. This is because the Western release wasn't nearly caught up to this point in the series yet, which not only resulted in outfit changes or key attacks being renamed, but the exclusion of Itachi, Kisame, and Tsunade, which is unfortunate because I can only assume these characters would have added so much to the plot. But as it stands, the plot is a bit underwhelming. The game itself tells a simplistic story of higher-ranking ninja being preoccupied by Orochimaru's antics, leaving Genin, like our boy, with opportunities to embark on much more difficult missions than typically allowed of them. The missions, which are the driving factor of the game, can be found in the Leaf Village's Hokage room, where you can typically choose between several different tasks. These tasks, which are ranked in order of difficulty, will progressively get harder throughout your playthrough. And I'll be honest, so far, sounds like a breath of fresh air. But while the concept is great and honestly very unique, you'll quickly realize that only some, keyword some, missions are worth your time. Well over half of these missions are some variation of transport this item from point A to B, or beat up the basic enemy types over and over and over again. These missions will always be shown on your map in the form of a red dot, typically requiring you to reach this location without dying or having your cart break. Broken by who, you might ask? While walking to your mission, you will frequently be ambushed by rogue ninja, aka the basic enemy type of the game, and you must defeat them all to continue trailing along. As you progress though, this will become more and more frequent of an occurrence, as the map will expand nearly 5 times its initial size, leading to longer distances to travel, and by proxy, much more encounters. And I'll be honest, there comes a point where these filler-ish missions become extremely difficult, especially in later missions. If it isn't the cart itself breaking that gets you, it's going to be the ridiculous time limit. At times, there will be several ninja unleashing absolute havoc on my cart, while I'm in the corner fighting somebody else. What the hell do you expect me to do here? However, there is a slight upside. Interestingly, for most missions, failures will not halt your progress, instead simply progressing you through the campaign while stamping a big failure on your mission list. Which, one, thank God, because Prisoner Escort 3 sucks. But I also assumed there'd be an option to replay these missions at a later time. Nope, This game prepares you for real life and gives you one shot at these tasks. Not only is this entirely too unforgiving, but also pretty frustrating, as seeing the word failure on my task list permanently is a sight that any real gamer will not stand for. Especially since once the main missions came around, I became way more invested in completing the game, which although are vastly outnumbered by the more fillerish ones, they will have extremely unique and interesting objectives of their own, typically allowing for some minor exploration, like collecting treasure chests, multiple routes to choose from, and an actual in-game save spot, which should give you an idea, these are much more lengthy than your typical A to B mission. My favorite example of this is Trouble in the Sand. This mission involves you teaming up with my boy Shikamaru as you infiltrate the Sand Village, and contains a plethora of different segments. Firstly, starting you off on the streets, then having you jump across rooftops, bouncing between platforms like your Crash Bandicoot, beating up mobs, and finally, the castle itself. Not only is the action, storytelling, and exploration exceptional here, but I absolutely love the chemistry between Naruto and Shikamaru in this mission, including an in-game cutscene of our dynamic duo basically calling this sand ninja a bitch.
Telling you you're okay. Man, what a win.
Or missions like Sasuke's Pursuit, which if you know anything about the series, you can probably guess the premise here. In order to find Sasuke, you'll have to make it through a group of enemies. Easy enough, but the difficulty really kicks in when you have to decipher which path to take amongst the three shown to you. This took me a long ass time, but finally I realized the shadows were actually slightly different, and well, that ended up working for me. While on the topic of main missions, the cutscenes for these are breathtaking. Sometimes. Once in a blue moon, we'll get a literal 2000s movie quality clip, which looks incredible, especially for a video game of this era. Sadly, these are few and far between, and most of the cutscenes are pretty standard and what you'd expect from a PS2 game. But between the good and the bad, I was pretty happy with them. And to an extent, they actually got me a little more invested into this story. It was also at this point where I started to not just deal with or enjoy, but actually look forward to playing this game. Not just because there was an actual purpose that in some way or another progressed the story, but these were actually fun. Not to mention a major breath of fresh air from the typical anime fighter that we get every time. Typically, towards the end of each main mission, a boss battle will erupt. Some of these are goofy as hell, like Choji fighting you over a piece of candy, and others will have you face off against iconic antagonists, like Kabuto, who can quite literally heal himself in the middle of battle. On multiple occasions, Gaara will also make an appearance, in which you'll have to maneuver around his sand, as he's an absolute defense warrior. My personal favorite is the multiple Naruto versus Sasuke battles though. Not only because they're so iconic, but the setup, scenery, and overall clash of their moveset is just so badass. At least as far as my expectations for this game go. And all in all, I thoroughly enjoyed every mission of this dynamic. So much so that I began to not despise the filler missions because they got me pretty hyped for whatever comes next. These filler missions will also become especially less taxing once you learn to master your skill set, which, trust me, is much easier said than done. Now, while the gameplay itself is very simple, controlling the characters still felt pretty wonky at times. It seems like no matter what I do, I'll constantly be facing the wrong direction, swinging my fist at the ghost of Zabuza, even when locked onto an enemy. Every attack is also very simple to execute, only utilizing 1 or 2 buttons each. You've got strong hit and, well, regular hit, which can be combined in numerous ways to combo on ground and while in air. Weaponry is also majorly important here, especially for the beat-em-up time-centric quests, like the Prisoner Escort Trilogy, our favorite. Of course, you have your usual varieties of shuriken and kunai, as well as some more explosive weaponry, like fire and flash bombs. These can be found by defeating enemies or by trading them in Emporium Kareen, which serves as an item shop of sorts. Here you can trade goods you've collected for perhaps more valuable ones, and stock up on heals while you're at it. Make no mistake, you will need these, because oddly enough, there's no block button. Instead though, you're able to dash, which is useful to confuse the shit out of enemies. And also coordinates with possibly my favorite move, substitution jutsus, which when timed correctly feels so good to pull off and puts you on the offense real quick. What is a bit of a bummer though is that you don't get much new supers as you progress, but the ones you start off with are pretty solid to be fair. Our main man Naruto gets most of his iconic special moves, including his signature Shadow Clone Jutsu, which can be used to overwhelm an enemy or to take some weight off your shoulders when dealing with an entire mob. Sexy Jutsu, which and of course Rasengan Power Strike. If I remember one thing about this game as a kid, it was being so confused at what Naruto was doing. In reality, this game was released in America well before Naruto had achieved this milestone, so to save spoilers, they named it Power Strike. GG. What you really want to take advantage of though is Naruto's Demon Fox transformation, which is needed to be built up over the course of battle. In this form, Naruto will spam Shadow Clones and Rasengans at the baddies and beat them into submission, leaving almost zero opportunity for them to counter. This is so badass and works wonders in boss battles. Legit, if this is used early in battle, you could take out some bosses' HP almost entirely by just being in this form for a short while. Aside from Naruto, certain missions will give you the opportunity to form a team, usually consisting of 2 out of the 3 selectable characters, Choji, Shikamaru, and Neji, whom will each have unlimited weaponry, but can only be used for a short period of time. While typically I would pick a favorite and stick with them for the majority of the game, I felt compelled to utilize each character almost evenly, as they all have unique supers that make them a valuable asset. Like Choji's Human Boulder to run down enemies and break down real boulders. Shikamaru's Traps, which I found to be essential for certain missions like National Treasure, and also come in handy in many situations. My personal favorites, Neji's 8 trigrams, 64 palms. It just looks super badass, and I used it every chance I got to get the upper hand on enemies and decimate some of the tougher ones. Although typically you can't manually add these guys to your team, Sasuke and Kakashi also make an appearance as playable allies, with some pretty useful supers of their own. Sasuke coming equipped with perhaps his most notable attacks, Fireball Jutsu and Chidori, while Kakashi has a Chidori of his own, and 1000 Years of Pain, which does some monstrous damage. All these characters can be super useful to switch to, as not only do they have unlimited HP, but also can help take some of the weight off your shoulders, especially in some more sticky situations. And in regard to the supers, I found them to feel second nature after a while, and I ended up enjoying these way more than the Class of Ninja ones. My only gripe here is that I do wish we had the opportunity to play with more characters aside from just Naruto, as playing as just our spiky yellow-haired boy does get a bit boring after a while. That being said, to get the most utilization out of these characters and your own super attacks, you will need to maintain chakra, which will spawn in the form of little blue balls alongside virtue. Virtue is a form of in-game currency, which you can use to maximize Naruto's stats like HP and stamina, or most notably, skill chips, which there are a damn lot of these. Thankfully, they're separated into 3 categories, called Taijutsu, Ninjutsu, and Special. Taijutsu and Ninjutsu typically improve your attack and defense in the respective category, while Special enhances Naruto's specific combat, such as adding a 4th Shadow Clone, or gaining the ability to use Naruto Uzumaki Barrage. After purchasing, these must be placed into skill plates, which you'll receive from progressing through the story. That being said, this game will be really freaking difficult if you don't utilize these. I can almost assure you that this is why I gave up on this game as a kid. So make sure to be constantly checking for any new upgrades that you can buy and any new skill chips you can add to your skill plate, which you'll certainly want to maximize prior to entering the final battle, properly titled The Final Battle. At this point in the story, Orochimaru has released this green gas, referred to as mold spores, across many areas on the map, turning the mob enemies into Orochimaru's subjects. This stage is rightfully quite lengthy. Not only is it full of convoluted twists and turns, and platforming segments, but the prisoners here aren't your typical fodder. They're actually sound ninja, who put up a real fight this time. I actually had to waste my demon energy on them, or I probably would have died. Upon making your way through the caves, we encounter the homies, who offer some sound words of advice, along with good old Team 7, who become our allies for these last showdowns. Shortly after this, you'll take on Kabuto for what feels like the 100th freaking time. I can only assume some of the previous battles with him were meant to be Itachi or Kisame, which again is pretty disappointing. But this time, at least there's a twist. You must first destroy all the prisms, which are spawning fodder left and right, and then take on not only Kabuto, but a giant as well. This can be quite difficult, especially since Kabuto attempts to heal really often. I found assaulting with a barrage of Shadow clones and alternating between Kakashi and Sasuke as often as possible was key to victory here. After defeating Kabuto, Orochimaru will rear his ugly head for the first time, and only time. Which, hey man, that's some pretty sick buildup. Once the fight begins, you'll see this guy is fast. I mean, really fast. He'll throw everything in the books at you. Tornadoes, Shadow Stalker, and a plethora of kunai. Your best bet is to unleash Demon Fox energy and use all your best moves and allies to your advantage. It also definitely helps to have your resources, including heals and weapons, stocked and ready for the final battle. I mean, when else are you going to use these anyway? Once defeating the long-tongued traitor, Orochimaru retreats and the credits roll. And we wrap up our playthrough at a respectable 10 hours. Well, kinda. Upon completion of the game, you will receive a few new bits of content to keep you busy. Firstly, New Game Plus is unlocked, where you're allowed to replay the story while keeping all your items and power-ups intact, which actually gave me the opportunity to pass the first level. Gaara and Kakashi are now selectable characters to freely add to your team. Boss battles are added to the map and can be accessed at any time, regardless of story progress. However, these will be much more difficult than the original version. If you want to win, it's crucial you use your newly unlocked Shuriken Plate, which is massive and allows you to maximize your power and use all of your skill chips. But before we do wrap up, we talked about a lot here today. So let's break down an overview of our thoughts on the game, including why I think this entry received such a negative reputation, and also the positive and redeeming qualities that I found within the game. When first starting my playthrough, I had a really tough time getting myself into the mindset of actually enjoying this title. The cart missions and the majority of the forced, again, filler content was downright tedious, repetitive, and far too unforgiving for a game of this nature. The gameplay can be pretty wonky, and the story itself is, all things considered, kinda dumb, which is, I can only assume, the main reasoning why this game holds the plaque as one of the worst titles in the franchise. However, and I'm not sure if I'm alone here, but once getting acquainted with and accustomed to the format, I found myself really enjoying my time spent here. I thoroughly enjoyed the character interactions, spending time upgrading my character's strengths, and honestly became invested in completing as many tasks as possible. I mean, hell, I'm just now getting back into Naruto after like 15 years of not watching it or playing any games, and I was really looking forward to every new plot point and continuation of my journey in this game. Uzumaki Chronicles, not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Am I right? Am I wrong? Does this game suck? Is it kind of slandered a bit? Is it not as bad as people make it seem? Also guys, make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it so I know to make more, maybe even Uzumaki Chronicles 2 review. We'll see. On our road to 1,000 subs, we're so freaking close. Appreciate y'all so much, man. See you guys really soon. Peace.